Hey, I'm Jill Deacon. Welcome to this week's episode of A Love Affair with the Unknown. Do you watch the TV show Allegiance? It is the top rated show on CBC Television, has been since it premiered in early 2024. It's coming back this winter for its third season. Allegiance is a cop drama, but not your typical cop drama, I think it's safe to say. It's an intentionally nuanced show that really doesn't shy away from addressing the problems in policing. ANAR Ali is the creator and the executive producer of the hit show. And for all her success, it's actually her personal story that we want to talk about today. It's got lots of drama itself and plot twists, including a fairly frightening subplot. When it comes to finding strength and purpose in the face of hard things and taking leaps into the unknown in pursuit of what feels right, Anar Ali is someone whose story I really wanted to share with you. So, Anar Ali, welcome. So happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome to A Love Affair with the Unknown.
Thanks, Jill, and I'm so happy to be here and to see you again.
Yeah. Um, okay, let's start. How are you doing? Let's maybe start there. How are you doing in this
Yeah.
hectic moment in this chaotic world?
Good. I think it's so interesting. I always, even when things get a little crazy, I just kind of try to recenter myself, partly because of my own journey. It's more easy to do it now.
Hmm.
When you kind of like, I think we all get outside our heads and things get crazy. So it is a bit intense. We're just started season 3 production. So as you know, that can be intense. But having said all of that, of course, super excited about it, but despite it all, feeling very grounded.
I want to get to, where that perspective that you're able to
Yeah.
summon when things get chaotic comes from. But maybe I'm going to rewind maybe to your first leap into the unknown, at least the first one that
Mm.
I know about. I want to set the scene here a little bit. You have graduated from business school. At this point, you are not at all working in the arts. You've graduated from business school. You're married. You're living in Calgary, and you're working kind of a career track job at Procter and Gamble.
Yeah.
First of all, how are you feeling? How is the Anar Ali of that, in that chapter of your life feeling?
Well, such a good question. And, it was like, so when I graduated, I wasn't quite married, but I was on that track. So, I was with my then childhood sweetheart, really, who I ended up marrying. And I think on the outside, it felt so good, but it wasn't a deep feeling, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I think I only realized that later. Even as I talk about it, it's interesting. I get a little emotional thinking about it because probably there's some compassion for that person who went through that. And not just me, but the other people around me. And what I mean by that is that I think sometimes when we end up numbing ourselves, or at least I did, to do the things that I think I was expected to do.
Right.
So, I did those things that, you know, I say immigrant family, but I think any parent wants you to follow something that's very secure. Um, they want to feel that you're safe. And then, especially if they've come from places that they weren't unsafe, that idea of security and safety are so important, and freedom are less important. Freedom of expression, etc. And it's like a loaded thing to say because there's so many things about that. But in a nutshell, I think I was just going through life, checking off boxes, and weirdly or interestingly achieving them. So it kind of creates a bigger gap between the idea of what you think you want, which might seem crazy. You're not even really accepting what you want. You don't even know, maybe, and going through it. So I think good but numb. Yeah.
So that's beautifully, thoughtfully described. I think probably a lot of people will relate to that. Living a life that from the outside might look like a lot of boxes have been ticked, and yet there's a feeling of not maybe being true to a self that you're not even sure is there. And then, okay, so with that all being said, you see a flyer on the sidewalk and everything changes. Tell me that story.
Yeah, it's a bit like a, in film language, they would call it the inciting incident, the thing that changed everything. So in some ways it is. Coming home from Calgary, live downtown, again, living in that perfect house, all that stuff that you're supposed to have. And I'm walking home because, through a beautiful park, and I get close to home and there's a flyer on the sidewalk that says, I don't know what it says, but I do see a brown face on it. Now, I pick it up. Why would I pick it up? Probably because of that brown face, because I think I saw writers or something on it. Pick it up, and it's the Alberta Writers Union conference happening that weekend in Banff. And now I had written as a kid. I loved it. I was a kind of a nerdy kid, always stayed in my room until my dad would kind of like coax me out, get me into things. But it was all stuff I put away, you know? But somehow looking at that pamphlet somehow gave me the feeling that, oh, there's another possibility available in life, And I wasn't conscious of that, but I remember taking it, going home that evening, telling my then husband that I want to do this. He was like, yeah, cool, go. But I don't think he realized what that it would mean. I don't think I did either, because when I called him from there in tears, it was the sense of feeling very much like I was at home, and
You
it was
you
hard for
got
him
to
to
this
understand.
you went
Yeah.
to this writer's workshop on kind of a whim, and you found that you when you got there that you suddenly felt like, "This is where I belong?"
Yeah, it was exactly it sounds a little bit, like, that doesn't make sense, but it really was because, I mean, of course, and the part of the story I'm missing right now is that the photo on that flyer was Chaim Salvadori, who's like, a beloved Canadian writer, and at the time, he was like, I mean, he still is a star, but he was he was kinda coming onto the national map or had been for a little bit, and
I
so
should say Chaim Salvadori for people who don't know that
yeah,
name. He's the best-selling and, as you say, really acclaimed author of, Funny Boy, The Hungry Ghosts. I mean, he's had, and was, as you say, maybe at that time, really starting to have literary success. And
yeah,
and was the fact that his face on that flyer was brown,
yeah.
was that significant for you?
So
Or how
significant.
significant?
Yeah, really significant because, I don't think I had imagined until then that there was a possibility to live here and be a writer. It never occurred to me
For
that you could,
you?
no, never occurred to me. Everything I read at school, I was a voracious reader, loved it. And, I was reading also African American work, but it never occurred, like not in a big way, like that was in my teens maybe, or even when I was younger. But as I got older, that all of that was left behind, Didn't, it probably didn't help that I came from a family that were big readers, but not of fiction. You know, that's like that made no any. It wasn't useful. So I come from a community and a family that's very practical. Versus if you kind of think about practicality versus beauty, beauty is like something. It's not essential, right? Enjoying what's to like pleasure and joy. Yes, on your vacations, but on a daily basis, work is really important
Hmm.
and security is really important. So I think seeing that made me realize, oh, it's possible because suddenly, I mean, Shyam is Sri Lankan, I'm not Sri Lankan, but there was something to see, something different, and maybe if I or something as closer to me than what I had been seeing, even though I loved the books I would been reading and the films I'd been seeing, and yet it was closer, it was just a little bit closer to who I am, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and then Shyam's role in your story, continues because not only was he the face on that flyer that sparked your deep-seated desire to go and take this plunge, he ended up giving you a message, saying something to you, that was influential in this leap in a new creative direction. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, it was a little bit like jumping off a cliff in a way because at this event, again, even though I feel at home and I come across like an extrovert, but fundamentally I can be very shy and I don't know people. So I'm kind of just milling about, trying my best to blend in, but also feeling like I love it. And he sweetly must have seen this, that I was out of place. And he came and struck up a conversation. And he was bored of these events because he'd been at so many. So we went for a drink and we really connected. And I confessed to him these ideas that I think I would like to be a writer, and what I used to do as a kid, and what I loved so much. And so when I bought his book, what he wrote to me the next day is, "Dear Anar, take the plunge. It's worth it. Love, Shyam." Now I took that as an edict, like an instruction. That was Sunday. I mean, I'll just say I was, young, but probably really good. I did it. Anyways, I went in and tried to quit on Monday. I say try because they resisted a little, but that's what I did. And
You went
it
back to
was,
Procter& and Gamble and said, I'm leaving. I've got
I
or
got to
you
go.
tried to.
I tried to go. And of course, you can imagine I'm also telling my partner at the time, when we're on a track to, like, be that couple who are like making loads of cash and living that life. And, we have all the stuff that you're supposed to have. And we're still, quite young. So, of course, I'm disrupting everything he thinks we're going to have too. But I don't want it. I never really wanted it anyway. So it was, which I can understand from his perspective why it was so hard for me to come out. It was a coming out.
Did you know then why you were taking that leap? I mean, what how what were you feeling?
Yeah. I just think it was a little bit like a forest of feeling, like I couldn't figure it out. It was a lot of like stuff that I didn't understand, but the feeling was big. That it was like almost like a light through this forest or something, which in a way it has taken me years to machete through, to get to what that feeling was. But I think it was a something that was pulling me towards that. And I've come to believe this, that in many ways, all of us have this. We're born with whatever it is we come with. And then sometimes we're lucky and we're guided towards that from a young age. And sometimes, or we're guided towards the things that's very reflected in society anyways. I have people in my family who are like business people and really successful, however you define that. And they're very satisfied and content. But if you don't have that reflecting yourself in society and it's nudged away from you, it's very easy to put it away. And I think that's especially true for women, you know,
Hmm.
because actually naming our desires is hard. And then being in a family where my mom, was a traditional relationship between my father and mother. He made the great dad, became a really good husband, wasn't always. Um, but I think she didn't always get to make certain choices. And when you're growing up seeing that, I think, you know, it was something that took me a minute to get to understanding my own wishes and desires. So I think it's not an unusual story in some ways. And
No,
yet
I
it,
think a lot of people really, in some cases, might not even be able to articulate, their desires
yeah,
or their needs or their wants.
yeah. And do you think it's because we just don't allow that special, like, what is that? I think, because you see it in some families where people seem more grounded. I've been thinking about Zoran Mamdani a lot in New York, the guy who's, just won the mayoral race, and he's Mira Nair's son, and how he's really seems to be so clear about who he is. And, he's got ads where he's eating biryani with his hands and talking about politics. And it's like, wow, there's like just a very clarity about himself. So there's no shame attached to it. There's just, this is who I am. And and so I don't know, it's a complex question, but I am curious always about how some people get to do that, right? It's
Me
interesting.
too. I think about that so much, and as a parent, you think,
Mm,
what am I doing the right things to cultivate that sense of confidence and trust in your inner guidance, in my kids? And
mm,
yeah, because it
yeah,
really does seem that some people come to it easily. Anyway, so you had
yeah,
this you
yeah,
had um, this fabulous moment of tapping into it and deciding to listen to that voice, and I should say, perhaps to fast forward over what I'm sure was much more complicated, than I'm putting it. your marriage ended, somewhere along the way here too. I mean, you were adjusting a lot
Yeah.
in your life. Um, Perhaps not as exactly as a result of this, but there was a whole lot of recalibrating, and you went ahead and got your MFA in creative writing from UBC, such a prestigious program that you got into, and you did that, and you wound up signing a 2-book deal with Penguin Publishers. So, you've in to some extent, your leap of trust into this unknown and more precarious way of living is being validated.
Mhm.
Do you remember how are you feeling at that point when committing to something that you love, but that comes with so much risk?
Yeah, it was fraught actually. You would think it should be all like, a bed of roses. Fraught because I think because I made the decision the way I did and once I once I flicked the switch or once the switch got flicked maybe, um, you know, it was inevitable I was going to leave the marriage. It was and that sounds sad, but also the saving grace is I think he's very happy now also. So that's good. And, nice guy. It wasn't anything about, anything except me becoming a different person in many ways, you know? And I think that it was fraught because I didn't realize, m- I call this a bit naive, but also because, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way towards myself, but I didn't realize, oh, okay, of course I'm not going to have a paycheck, you know? And, I'd been working, like a typical, family who has a business in my parents' motel since I was 11, and then my dad's other businesses. But I think that it was fraught because all of a sudden my life was more precarious around how I'm gonna, like, actually live. Uh, I'm on my own, so suddenly being single after I'd been with someone since I was 16, because he was literally my childhood sweetheart. I decided to move from Calgary to Toronto because I have this idea that all the big writers live here. So of course, when I'm going out, I'm going to be hanging out with, of course,
Of course
to
you are.
Mystery. Of course I am. I still have yet to meet Royington Mystery. So whatever, I had these ideas, romantic ideas of being a writer. And so it was fraught from that perspective. And also, it's one thing to want it, it's a different thing to do it because there was a gap and, between I think there's definitely a thing is some talent for sure, 100%, but then there's a lot of just hard work and a lot of craft and a little bit of luck because timing is important too. Um, so I think all those things just worked out for me, but over a long period. I always think that you can get what you want mostly, but not all at the same time, you know? So
Mhm.
it took much longer than I expected. Um, or hoped for, but yet when I look back, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Like despite like the mistakes, some mistakes or thinking things I didn't think through, if I hadn't done it that way, I could have still been married to the same person, living the same life, and that could have been an okay life,
Mhm.
but it wouldn't have been this life.
So then you changed that life even again
Yeah.
because you took sort of another leap having, written these novels published by Penguin, and then you decide to work in film and television. Tell me about that leap.
Yeah, it is a movie twist plot kind of thing. Is it's like, when is she gonna be satisfied? When does she just like I think my dad and mom would always be like, when is she gonna settle down? Because, settling down means all sorts of things and not changing your life in so many ways all the time. But again, I was just following something. And I was living in Mexico, writing my second book, finishing it. I have a lot of friends in film and TV. And one of them in particular, Geeta, is encouraging me to apply to the CFC. I've not heard of it because
The
I'm
Canadian
finishing
Film
my.
Centre.
Yes, thank you. The Canadian Film Center, which is such a wonderful place. And I've not heard of it. I've never even thought of myself as writing screenplays. Again, same thing. I don't think this is clearly something I have to go through therapy about, right? I don't think I'm capable of. So, Jill, you're kind of being my therapist right now. I mean, I'm lying. I have that therapy, but it's like it's true. I still battle this thing about oh, can I do it? Can I do it? And yet I continue to do it.
But that's the thing. I think everybody has that "Can I possibly do this?" voice, but you say you think about that and then you just do it anyway.
Right? And I think a
Feel
lot
the
of
fear and
people,
do it anyway, as they say.
don't you think? And I feel like that's something that many of us do. Like, when you're just faced with the circumstance, like, of it's really tough. I don't know what to do. And then you do it anyways. I mean, in this case, of course, it was like a choice, but in some ways it didn't feel like a choice because I started realizing I wasn't also going to have a sustainable life as a novelist.
Mm.
So part of it was me rethinking things because, okay, I know I could go back to the business world. Actually, there's parts of it I love, that which I get to do as a producer now. Love that part, but I couldn't go back. And yet the novel world was also not always completely satisfying. S- You
Well,
know,
and maybe the pragmatism and practical approach from your family kicked in. That was part of
that's
the
it.
driver.
That was it was the drive. And so go to the CFC, get again a little bit of like some good timing. I find out about the program 3 weeks ahead. I get
3 weeks before the deadline, you find out
yes,
that it even exists,
yeah.
and you apply and you get in.
It I know, and I feel like certainly it speaks to good things. Yes, of course, the talent, but again, a little bit of timing luck because what if I'd not even heard of it and another
Sure.
year had passed and I might have like not even I'm like, oh, forget it. Life in Mexico is fabulous. I'm just gonna stay here because literally you could, right? You could continue writing, take your time. Life is more affordable also for artists, so on. So I apply, I get in it with my first screenplay, which is an adaptation of my short story. So at least there was that kind of like bump up, but I had to really study how short stories became films, which is also actually realized so fun to see how Sarah Polly took um, the bear over the mountain to make
Right.
it away from
Away
her.
from
What did
her.
she do?
Mhm.
Or how did Ang Lee take Annie Prue's Brokeback Mountain and make it into Brokeback Mountain? You know, beautiful. And so I got into that uh, again. Well, when it was a jumping into the deep end of things, definitely I feel like I was the least experienced in my group. Um,
But
but
did
such a
that feeling was it different? I mean, having taken one huge plunge before and
yeah,
found it so validating and sort of worth it,
yeah.
did that make it easier the second time?
Somewhat. And yet I feel because I was still continuing to get there was a lot of what I haven't necessarily spoken about. There was so much almost daily pressure from my family to stop.
Hmm.
Stop because they were even though they were I would say proud of me, they just thought I think my dad without saying it felt like and I was very close to him, but he felt like I threw my life around away without him saying it. So, I think it's like I didn't have any of the check boxes that he wanted so much for me. I didn't have a marriage. I didn't have a big income. I didn't have I bought an old house instead of a new house. I bought all those things, did all those things, living like like a bohemian life, which is the absolute opposite of what you want your child to do, at least from his perspective.
I remember my dad always used to say when I'd be sort of pursuing music and theater and all my dreams, and he'd say, "When are you gonna start to contribute to the economy?" He wanted me paying taxes. That's how he would
That's how
that was
that
sort
was
of
the
the
boundary.
measure of his child having landed in a safe place. So, yeah, I get that. It's like they put up with your lark, perhaps,
Yeah,
but they felt that the real track for you to be on was, "Okay, let's get back to
to the
things
real
that we
life.
recognize." Mhm.
And or grow up maybe, or like something about like and also I think I don't know if this was true for you, but for me, I felt like because I was succeeding in this other path, it wasn't like I wasn't succeeding. So for him, it was probably like, I don't know. And he was a businessman who went from after we moved here, went from really struggling, and then really making it in a big way. He built the second biggest sportswear wholesale company in the country,
Hmm.
you know, um, and he was so successful. And, I think he always wished I'm the youngest of four girls. So I think, and I was like, his caddy when we golfed. And so I was kind of probably the son he didn't have. So I always feel like I let him down fundamentally, you
Mm.
know, because he probably wanted to give me the business. He kind of implied it. And here I am like, no, I'm gonna write books and make like no money and like live in Mexico and like. So I
Mm.
I feel like it was he had it in his hand with what I was doing, and then I was I did this.
It slipped through his fingers
Yeah,
as you found your calling.
yeah,
So, okay, you now obviously, all of these leaps into new territory have clearly paid off, even in a way that your father could recognize because as I mentioned earlier, Allegiance is a hugely successful television show.
mm,
I realize that did not happen overnight, but, you got there and you've got this extraordinary success on your hands, and just as you're starting to make this show, life throws you perhaps the biggest unknown. Tell me what happens when you're settling into the writing room for Allegiance.
yeah. So it was still in development. And for some of your listeners who don't always know, it's like, so usually if you have an idea, then you get a producer to hopefully buy your idea. And then after that, you're going around to the networks like CBC and so on to try to sell it. So at this stage, I sold it to CBC. And I know I have something in my hands because all the networks wanted it. And CBC is the one we went with. Great choice. They've been so wonderful to work with. And second day of what they call the mini room. So you're still kind of at the you're not what's called greenlit. So we're still trying to work towards a green light. Some chunks of the show are done. I've thought through lots of things, but we get together a room to like get it to the next stage, so to speak. So this is the second day of my mini room, and I get a call from my doctor, and I'd my surgeon, I'd gone through what's, because one of my sisters had gone through breast cancer. My sisters and I all got tested for this gene. It's called the BRCA gene, which some people know about more because years back, Angelina Jolie talked about it. Gives you an 80% chance of breast cancer, 40% chance of ovarian. So I'd gone in for prophylactic ovarian surgery. They remove your ovaries, and then they take it to the lab and test it. One of my sisters had done it. Everything was fine. I didn't expect anything. I'm really like at that point in my life where many of us think as if this is ever going to happen to me.
Hmm.
And then that was what the call was. And it was 9:30. I had called her for something else. And she said, "Oh, I'm glad you called. It was COVID, so we weren't seeing each other." So over the phone at 9:30, she tells me that I have cancer, ovarian cancer. And of course, I break down, make some phone calls. My partner is away at the time. He's on a big canoe trip out somewhere without phones. And I don't want to tell my mom because we just lost my dad 2 months earlier. And she just saw another daughter go through cancer. So I'm not going to tell her. And go into the writing room. I just tell the room I'll be there in 15 minutes late, get myself together. And I just get through that week. I'm getting emotional talking about it because it was heavy to go through it. And, but and I think I'm going to work through chemo because I'm like, again, of course I can do this. And of course I couldn't. Chemo is like, so, Jill, because you've been
Yeah.
through it
Mhm.
twice. I
Mhm.
can't imagine. It's so strong to go through it because it takes a kind of resilience. Yeah. And,
Yeah. It's,
yeah, see.
I understand I'm relating to a lot of this, that feeling of when you know something and you're just exploding inside with the weight of it and the right person to tell you just so you sort of tell people in a certain order, I guess, and
Yeah.
when that order's not available, you have to hold it's just a weird such a weird way to look at the world when you know
Yeah.
something so extraordinary and no one else knows it yet, and anyways, that must have been a pretty crazy week for you.
It was, and, and you don't have to share, but, instinctively, I wanna ask you, like, did you hold it for a minute before you shared it with people? Is that why what you mean? Like
I remember the same feeling of not wanting to tell my mother yet. It wasn't the right time, not for the same reasons. I mean, I hadn't lost my father yet, but just the feeling of she can't handle this now. I need to get more people around me. I need to get my messy reaction to this out on the shoulders of other people so that I'm more ready to tell my mom with a brave face kind of thing.
right, because she's gonna be breaking down in her own way, and
Yeah, I don't want her to kind of take this
yeah.
in a way that will be more than she can bear, and
Yeah,
yeah, so I do remember those
yeah. It
those
comes from
feelings.
such a kind I mean, that's such a kind perspective, and yet it's so interesting. I don't know if you had the same experience, but my mom was so mad at me for not telling her earlier.
Oh,
She
hmm,
was like, I just think she was going through a lot, and I mean, it's okay. I think that anger was just, "Don't leave me out of it," and she was just kinda coming into this, like, space of having she would been married to my dad for over 60 years, and she'd never
and he had
slept
just
alone,
died.
and,
Yeah,
she's, like, married to him, like, yeah, she'd never slept all those things that you hear of, like, these relationships have been together for a long time, um so I think she was trying to, like, claim herself also in some small way there. But yeah, I went through the chemo and I took a break and didn't tell too many people. But, a little bit not ridiculous, but just tells you a little bit of, like, blinders on. Like, I get up from my first big surgery, which is, a hysterectomy and a lymphectomy, and I didn't do too much research. I'm glad I didn't. But I woke up and it's COVID and I'm in a room with 3 old men because they were putting people where they could. And I guess they felt like, I mean, that was its own thing. But I wake up, no one can be there with me.
mm,
But I'm calling people, including work, like people, my producers, to tell, like, I'm like, in a way, I think it's a disconnect. There's a little bit of disconnect to just keep that there. I'm okay. I'm still going to be okay. So when I go through this, I do when I could get through that surgery and start chemo 3 weeks later. That's when I think reality hit. When I started chemo, it's like, oh,
okay, yeah.
yeah. And I don't know how it was for you, but it was like,
Chemo has that effect, yeah.
yeah, right? It was like the craziness. And it's like, I don't know what yeah, go ahead. Sorry. You were gonna say something.
Well, I was just wondering the how do you deal with fear? And I ask that given that we've just heard about other things in your life, other chapters where you did something incredibly brave. You took a risk with your finances and your family and your reputation and your career and all these things. You faced different kinds of fear,
Mm.
and then you really have the ultimate fear, this looming presence of death, around you. Your father's just died. Your sister's been through cancer. You're going through this hell of cancer treatment. How do you, Anar Ali, at that moment, and maybe in general, deal with fear?
Yeah. It's a hard one. I think we all have to ask that or sometimes unconsciously deal with it. I think for me, I I I've realized what is really helpful for me. At least in that time, I became more conscious of it because when I got the news, I didn't actually think, why me? I just thought, I also felt, I know this is weird to say, took me a minute, not right away, but I was lucky that they found it because ovarian cancer is not something that you find easily. So I felt lucky that my sister gave me this gift of, like, she went through the craziness of breast cancer twice like you did, and because then we got tested. Had I not, like, I have a cousin right now who's going through it, and 'cause it's genetic, and they found it later. So I felt very lucky, but I also felt like at some point, because my dad passed, because I'm dealing with my own cancer, I had to make a this is where I get emotional. I had to make a really conscious choice to choose life, you know? And I think it gets emotional for me when I do say it, and I've been only starting to talk about it more, is it's also scary to choose life, you know? In some ways, I think it was COVID, so many things, even though there's lots of good things happening in my life and lots of beautiful people in my life, I also felt like in that moment, I remember thinking, well, if this is the end, I kind of made the choices. I didn't get everything I wanted, but who does? But I made some small difference, maybe. And I still did the life. It went through the things I had to go through. And I made the choices that I was lucky enough to be led towards. So I
Mhm.
felt lucky. And yet it was scary to choose life in this new form, because it was like you had to like keep the fear at bay. It was there. You knew it. But it's kind of with us, all of us. Like, we all kind of pretend we're never going to die. And yet we are, you know? So,
Absolutely.
right. Like it's kind of, but it just got closer. It's just suddenly it was in the rear view mirror and now it's in front of you.
What does that look like when you say choose life? Because I assume, when you go through cancer, it is, um, with every passing year since you've left the chemo rooms behind, it's in the rearview mirror, but it's always there.
It's
It's
always
always
there.
that,
It's always there.
ex-boyfriend that you've dated and you can't, delete their phone number. It's always there in your story, and it can inform, the way you feel about everything that comes after it. So what does that look like for you to choose life?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the moment it was one thing and it continues to be it keeps evolving. But in that time when I was going through it, it was very much, I started really like thinking about, so as I went through chemo, my cycles were 3 weeks, every 3 weeks. The first week was a hell. And then I realized, oh, and then it took another week to kind of feel okay. And then that third week was choosing life.
Mm.
you know? So I couldn't, yoga is one of the things I do. So, I would insist it was winter on doing my yoga in the morning. Not a lot. I would work on allegiance. So it became an island for me. Allegiance in a way became my lifeline, one of my lifelines to get me through. Like, I think I've said this metaphor before, but it was a bit of island hopping between the key, get to the vacation of that. Because it did feel like vacation, well, even though I was working, because I was so excited to get there, you know?
Mhm.
And for me, my chemo in those first 2 weeks were like the first week was pure hell. I'd just be in bed. Second week, I was rousing. So start to like another way to choose life was cooking. Small. But I heard Zuleika Jujuad, if you know her, she's
Yes.
yeah. She
Mhm.
said this beautiful
She's
thing.
also a cancer, patient and survivor. She's married to John Baptiste and,
Yeah.
publishes the isolation journals, yeah.
Yeah, she's such a wonderful inspiration and wonderful writer. And she said this, and I thought, oh, yeah, this is right. She's like, people always tell you, live your today like it's your last day. And she says, no, what I've realized is that there's so much pressure in that. Live each moment like it's your first. And, unintentionally, I think I was doing that. Like, cooking became important, even though my partner is a great cook and he wanted to cook. I'm like, no, no, I'm going to cook today because it's a choice to like, I get to be the one who's like in it, in the kitchen, using my hands, feeling the food, smelling the food, all those things. So that too was choosing life. And I happened to have a show that I was focused on. But if I didn't, maybe it would have been, oh, I'm starting a new book. I don't know, but something that, or if I don't have kids, but if I think you have kids,
Yeah.
that would also snap you into place in a different way with life. I
Yeah.
don't know if that happened for you, Jill. And again, you don't have to share, but um, I I wonder if, in a way, birthing a show because I felt the need to do it, was more important for me because I don't have children. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think they
Hmm.
necessarily go hand in hand. And I don't want to take away from this idea that, oh, women, you have to have children, because I certainly don't feel like I needed to. But
I
I
think it's
just
more that
wonder,
you appreciate. I think you just relish the ability to be present for and engaged with almost anything that
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
that brings you joy or that gives you purpose. Or I find the ability to find joy and beauty and delight in even simple things on a afternoon walk. I appreciate those in a way that I certainly didn't before
wow.
I had, yeah, the uncertainty of multiple cancer diagnoses come into my life. So I think that's how I interpret what you're saying.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that makes so much sense to me. So yeah, in whatever that is in your life in terms of the focus of it. And I do, and taking it's also the everyday pleasures and joys. And
Mhm.
in some ways, it reminded me of like when I was living in Mexico, there was this kind of like, people say it's a bit cliche when we go outside of our worlds because we tend to be, you know, we work to an excess. We're very achievement, accomplishment oriented, but there's so many other ways to live. And, there's so much joy in the everyday. And, I remember in Mexico, it was very much people would work hard for sure. A lot of people in my life were artists and writers and Mexican writers and artists. But the thing is, there was this idea of like ending work at a certain hour. Like by 6, you were done because one of the greatest joys of life was food. One of the greatest joys of life is music. So,
Hmm.
music and food often went hand in hand in the evenings. So, I think for me, it was also recalling of how to live. And not that I achieve it every day, but I try, to do it in whatever way. Again, living each moment is a new moment. And it sounds perfect to do, but it's not easy. It's almost a very meditative thing to do, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I also always think it's a choice.
Mhm.
It's something that it's not necessarily, yeah, picture book, perfect and easy, but it's a choice. We can
Yeah.
decide to be present to what's happening or appreciate smaller things and
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
satisfied with those and keep it all in perspective.
That's it.
It's
Yeah.
amazing to me that, honestly, that's what you said about when you had your diagnosis and you thought, "Well, if this is it for me, I I've haven't got everything, but boy, am I ever happy with the way I did live the life that I got." And obviously, happily, that was not the point where your story ended.
Yeah.
But what a remarkable measure of the choices that you made, the risks that you took, the change that you went through that was no doubt incredibly hard. We've, you
Mhm.
know, glossed over it and made it sort of sound like fascinating, fun chapters in your story, but there was so much difficulty, no doubt, in making these really diff you know, different choices in your life. And what an incredible measure to have that moment where you realized those were the right things to do because
Yeah.
I feel like I honored my desires. I found who I needed to be, and I took the risks to get there. So
Yeah.
you do have the best story. You really
Oh.
do.
Thanks, Jill. I mean, I feel like, well, listen, the more I get to know you, because, even like when you mentioned your dad, seeing his photographs with you, like I think in many ways we all have these, not to take away anything from my story. I don't mean it like in that Canadian ways. No, no, but you too. I don't mean it like that. But I really genuinely think this in so many ways, our lives are extraordinary. And mine just took me on this journey. And I feel, um, and again, this cancer thing, we just don't know, right? It's like that's why the title of your podcast is so perfect because we always think we have certainty. We always think we have security, but really we don't. We really don't, and this is so hard to live with, acknowledging that it's there all the time, and for us as cancer survivors, yeah, like, I won't go into details, but recently I had some stuff going on and had to go get checked. And I was nervous, and it was like, again, it comes through and it's like, oh, no matter what, and I'm okay. But it was like, again, this kind of, it's that phone number, that ex-boyfriend's phone number,
Yes.
just always
It's
there.
always there,
And
and
sometimes you
sometimes the
click up,
phone might ring and you you don't
it
want
might
it
ring.
to be that number.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah. And so in a weird way, it's a gift. I don't wish it on anyone, but it is a weird gift if you get it and get through it. Yeah.
As they say, it's the gift that comes wrapped in barbed wire.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Anar, I'm so happy to talk to you about this.
Oh,
You
me
are a
too.
remarkable human, a wonderful storyteller, both on in front of a microphone and on the page and on screen. So
No,
bravo to you.
thank
All
you.
the best with the 3rd season. We'll be
Thank you.
watching Allegiance and rooting for you, and you've got the best story. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for doing this.